So if you do images bigger than 2 by 2 inches, to me, this is kind of the sweet spot. But if you go larger than that, oftentimes you kind of want to invest more time in. And the beginning thumbnail stage is really for you to be able to be as loose and expressive as possible. If you think about writing, when I have to write papers or anything, I have to write everything that I think right away and then edit later on, because if you get caught up in the editing in between, you can easily forget what you were moving on to, where you were going with that sentence. It's pretty much the same thing. Give yourself the freedom to kind of unleash yourself. Don't worry too much about if you do something and you're like, oh, I kind of want to correct that. You can avoid a lot of erasing unless that has something that's really important to do. What I'm saying is you can avoid correcting things rather, because you should be doing these quick enough that you're just moving on to the next one and building off of that. If you're trying to edit, you can really get in your own way with sketching and getting these ideas out. So 2 by 2, talk about some lines real quick. So line quality, these are just really easy examples. Curves tend to be calmer and often have a sadder or sometimes organized feeling to them, just inherently, that's how people kind of view them. Jagged lines tend to be aggressive, sharp in an abrasive way, and often are associated with like moods like anger or stuff like that. So that's kind of an easy jumping off point. If you see an adjective you're going towards, more jagged, sharp lines will create like an anger feeling, and more curves will usually create more of a calming feeling. Vary widths. So this is mostly for like, this is a brush pen specifically, but I like to describe this as kind of, it's like food, when you eat food. You can have a delicious meal, but if the texture throughout the whole meal is just mush, it's not that delicious. You might get sick of it by the end of the meal. But if you have a little texture in there, a little bit of crunch or variety, really, for our senses, it's much more delicious. Varied lines do the exact same thing. Oftentimes, if you have a ton of tiny, tiny lines hatching or going, this is called hatching, you just do the diagonal marks. It can be really laborious to look at, and people's eyes get tired of kind of interpreting that. With a little bit of variety, thicknesses, having some thick lines, having some thin lines. Thick lines are really good for emphasizing something. Thin lines are really good for, as we move on, shading or creating value and pushing things back. Having a variety of these two lines will help create a lot more interest without there having to be, and I don't mean this in a bad way, a lot of work put into something. You can if you look at cartoons, oftentimes the outline can be a little thicker than the information inside. And that's a good way to emphasize something without having to go out of your way of making the subject, all color and the background black and white. That's a lot more work to get all of that together just to emphasize something than it is to outline something with a thicker line and have the details that don't need to be as upfront in thinner lines. I'm going to do a brief composition. I guess I don't actually need to share screen because I'm already. Brief slideshow on composition. So composition, some super simple, there are tons of ways that people will say work on composition. These are some super simple ones that will help give a lot of interest to a project. And I want you to be thinking of these in your thumbnails because you can use the exact same lines, move the composition around, and it looks totally different, or the weight of that subject is totally different. So the most basic is the center, evenly spaced composition. We see this a lot when you're emphasizing one object, so like a portrait, but it's not very interesting. And usually you'll see that in presidential portraits or, those kind of stuffier portraits of important people. But it is good at emphasizing one subject. Off to the side, so if we're seeing this as a whole sheet of paper, don't worry too much about the actual subject matter. There can be a lot of tension in an image when you move the subject just off to the side. You could even put it all the way touching to one side. Keep in mind, we'll have a border, so you don't want to move it all the way off to the paper, but this helps to create drama. Like imagine if that's a person's face peeking into a background that's a room. It'll put a lot of emphasis on that person coming into the room and almost the action of that person moving into our scene. But you can do it with abstract things too. If you move things to the edge, usually the sides, you'll create a sense of tension or a movement that'll kind of oftentimes make us follow whatever's over here. If it's really high on the composition, it'll feel very light and floaty. This would be good for like, I'm already seeing kind of those loopy lines, but floating up would feel kind of cloud-like and airy within the composition. The exact opposite would feel very, very heavy in the composition. Some of these are don't do's, and some of these are in certain situations. Like you wouldn't, if you don't want something to feel like it's very heavy, this is a mistake to use this composition. So be aware of kind of the adjective or whatever you feel like you're being inspired by and the lines you're using, and then the composition on top of that too. Diagonal lines. Diagonal lines are really good at leading the eye into something. There's a lot of action and tension in a different way. So, I mean, this already looks like comets falling, or I can see something exploding and falling to Earth, or, there's a lot of kind of narrative elements already in that, just from the composition of that thing. That one would be a really fun one to kind of build on. The S curve, oftentimes you'll see this in landscapes for like a path leading through, or space in between trees. What it will do is kind of makes the viewer interact with the composition in a different way. So the viewer tends to follow that path, follow that line throughout and interact with more of the image.
It's like it creates depth.
Yeah, and then because it's thinner in the back and larger in the front, it doesn't have to be just like this. It could be all the same shape, and you're doing the S curve too. You're making the person follow that path, whether it is a literal path or the absence of something. You're making them follow that all the way through your whole image. And then the rule of thirds. This is probably the most simple, complex one. It's really good for pretty much anything. And really all it is you're separating the image into thirds vertically and thirds horizontally. And then where these separation lines meet up are the points of interest. The more points of interest you hit, typically the more engaging that composition will be. But you don't have to hit all of them. You can just hit some. So you think of, again, landscapes are really easy to do compositions for. If you think of a large tree and then a smaller shrub, that's much more interesting with the large tree off to the side than it just being centered as a large tree in the middle. This is a really common photography composition too. It's used a lot, and it's really easy to activate a space with. It'll work with squares too. You'll just have to make sure whatever it is your imaginary lines are going through are drawing into thirds, both horizontally and vertically. I think that's the last one. So yeah, some super simple compositions that you can use. I want to get back to some thumbnails I did. Wait, is this on? Yes. So, oh, don't work with that. Thank you. It's been doing that when I don't even have an email. Wow. I cropped these a little larger and then I drew them in and I drew these a little larger. When I started drawing in here, I ended up cropping them out just because I wanted to re-angle the composition. You're super open to do that. So I just drew these borders and I was thinking of something more jagged, almost like a vortex, a sharp, angry vortex, or like, I don't know why, but it must be from a cartoon or something that I've seen. Like a murder of crows all flying up at you, and you can only see through them just to that peak, that point, a point of interest. So everything's moving around to be that kind of white, really jagged lines, pretty much just straight lines where I'm kind of scratching back and forth like this. Then you can see this one. This one doesn't have as much of a point of interest. It's probably more in the center, but I do like the way it makes you, it feels like you're almost riding down that waterfall, or it's almost like hair. Yeah. This is charcoal. Yeah, I like charcoal a lot. A really soft pencil will work too, because it can be very, smushing it around is very painterly. I really like that. But yeah, this is just a little bit of charcoal. And you can feel how much more calming, this one is than this one. This is a little abrasive. And this one feels like almost an environment without it even being an objective of environment. So I would say what we're going to do is take your sketchbook. You don't have to use the marker. I just tend to use the marker. And separate in a couple blocks, 2 by 2 about. I would leave a little bit of space in between them. Do, like 6 to a page if you have an 8.5 by 11. A little bit of space all around them allows you that once you're going back in to judge them to write in some notes of, actually, you should probably move this off to the side a little bit. So that looks pretty easy. I would kind of just read through these and wait for something to pop up in your mind. Don't think about a thing in terms of, this reminds me of this thing specifically, a computer. I'm just looking around. But more of a feeling what that might look like. There's a lot of kind of series and cartoon shows. For some reason, I keep going back to cartoon shows. 2D design is great in those. Where something is happening to a character, and oftentimes, if anyone's ever seen the old Fantasia Disney movies, they have parts in them where the music is playing and it's really just this non-objective shapes and colors happening to them. Try to think a little bit more like that. Yeah, like fireworks. Yeah, yeah. Or if you think of the Tame Impala album, if you've ever seen the Tame Impala album, where it's just those lines moving through that wave with the sphere in the middle, that's pretty non-objective of what's even going on there. It uses lines. So I feel like the ones with energy are a little bit easier to do. Like dangerous, I almost feel like waves, but light, like in a lightning kind of matter. I almost want to continue making these abstract landscapes. So I did this one just now, and I have something in my brain that I'm really thinking of, and I know I'm going to have to change it. If I really want to accomplish what I'm thinking, I'm definitely going to have to change it because this does not match that. It's a little too zigzag design to me. I almost want it to be like these crashing wave peaks. So I would just move on to the next one. I'm not gonna, if I want to continue chasing whatever this is that I was looking at, I would just move on to the next one, or I'll just pass on it and come back, circle around to it. But I'm not gonna erase this or edit this too much. It's kind of a good way to, what was it, Thomas Edison said, instead of failing, he found thousands of ways not to make a light bulb. It's kind of the same thing. If you have this saved, you know what not to do if you're going to chase something very specific going forward. So really give yourself the freedom to fail and not make something perfect to begin with. Probably feels a little limiting at first. In the first couple drawings, you'll probably be pulling on something you already are familiar with. We'll put it that way. And as you push through, oftentimes you can be inspired by the work that you just did. Focus in on that. So if you say, I have this one area and I really like this area, redraw that area, but zoom into it. You're like, I don't like the rest of this area. It's too, it looks too much like it's, you know, a landscape or something like that. Cut that part out and just zoom into an area that you think is more interesting. And you can build into that more and more as you go. For mine, I started with this one up here, and I didn't really like it. I was just moving on. And then I was thinking of the waves and the crashing, and I'm using that diagonal composition too, where I have the diagonals going up this way instead of falling down, and it's kind of bleeding up, making the waves feel more like they're crashing. They're not actually, you know what I mean. As I kind of built on this, I was thinking almost like maybe it's the Black Cauldron, the Disney movie, where there's like this it's in a lot of movies, but the spires are dead trees just jutting out of the ground is kind of what I thought with this one. They didn't get there quite as much. They don't feel quite that menacing. And I think if they were a little more just almost more like this spear-like coming out of the ground, it might work. I felt like that wasn't really doing it, so I was just like, I'll just go back to the curves. I like the way this feels like there's something in this space that you can kind of fall into almost or investigate. And then I thought, well, I wonder if I could do that same thing, but with jagged lines instead. So I moved on to this one. I actually like this one. It feels almost like the side of a hill with, you know, trees collapsing in, falling on each other. And so I kind of moved on to build on that a little bit more. But I felt like this one still has something that I'm trying to place that I think is more special than this one. So I'll probably go back now and build off of this one and make it better. Feel free to, you know, if you normally draw like this, drawing like this, or scribbling into things, your marks, letting your pencil almost lead you a little bit more instead of just trying to rely on your mind guiding your pencil. Sometimes you can just throw in some scribbles and build off of that. What does that feel like? What is that going to look like? How can I make that better? It's a good place to go, especially with these thumbnails where there's no risk in making a bad one. You know, like there's nothing. It's all investigation at this point, so it should all be play. If you've already done 6, you can move on. I would just try to build further in. Let's think of this as laborious work. We're just doing something else right now based on. Don't think of it as super laborious. Just searching for what, how you can make something better. Because, like I said, with this one, I like this one, but it's not really there for me. So I'm going to take it and try to go in different directions with it to build it bigger. Yeah. If you have 6 done already, you can expand on them. I think for your second set, what I would do is take one of those initial ideas and build on it instead of just doing 6 random ones, you know, developing what you already have instead of just continuing to kind of search around, but search what you have already created. What often helps, I think, to investigate something is asking yourself questions like an annoying toddler, like why? Why do I? If I like this thing, why? What is it that I like about that thing? Until you can get to a point that you can no longer divide that thing down. There's something special I like about this thing. I'm not exactly sure what it is. I think it's the freshness of these lines is really what I'm attracted to in a lot of drawings like that. And I'm always kind of jealous when people can really pull it off. So I'm kind of building on that more and more. I want those crackly, almost unpredictable lines, because you can do a sharp, jagged diagonal like that. That's a super predictable, jagged line, a lightning bolt kind of shape. So how do you get that without this? Is kind of what I'm investigating. you reach to a point where you don't, where you need more inspiration, what you can do too is turning your material upside down, metaphorically. I was drawing all these with very scritchy lines like this, and so I wanted to add a little bit more variety, so I started drawing just with the side of the pencil, and that makes an interesting mark, so maybe I can start combining those two things together, where I wasn't even thinking about, you know, this kind of shape and this hand kind of thing emerged, and now I'm kind of like, oh, that's could be an interesting thing that I wasn't thinking of until I messed with my material. So hatching and cross hatching, I just realized that's on the list. Can be used effectively to darken an area. Hatching is just a series of lines close to each other. Usually they're going in the same direction, or it's often used to describe form without actually shading something or modeling something. So if I want to darken this area, the closer I put these lines together, the darker they'll seem. The more space I put in between them, the more of a gray it will kind of look like, and almost no space, you can like eventually basically fade into the white of the paper. Cross hatching is hatching plus more hatching, but in the opposite direction, or in a checkerboard pattern kind of. It's just the same thing, making something darker with more density in lines. And I've used it a little bit. This is kind of like hatching here, just to make kind of description. It doesn't have to be straight lines every time. It can be a series of curved lines to kind of describe something, especially non-objectively, where you're not really describing a form that's actually there. You're describing, direction and kind of shape that isn't finished, which is kind of really interesting sometimes. So we'll work on these for until 7:15, and then I'll give you guys a little bit of a break, and you can. I'll give you guys a break to clear your head, but also look around for other inspiration, and then we'll come back. We will draw a little bit more and talk about these. Okay, at 7:15, you want to look up here real quick. As you walk around, look at anything and you can kind of like blow it up or break it down into just lines that distract it, kind of let your material take over. This drawing was inspired by the shells. We have the X for that back bracket that I did at the side of the pencil, and then these more vertical R's, and then I took the kind of circle shapes and I just moved them off to the side just so it wasn't a one-to-one representation of it, and just kind of scribbled on it. I think that's a pretty interesting one too. It almost looks like a scene in Dragon Ball Z when he's like powering up and everything's like destroying behind him. That's kind of what this one reminds me of. So I could almost pull on that a little bit more. And then this one is those brackets holding the wire across. But it almost looks like some kind of science, sci-fi desert scene where I'm seeing these as like these big towers like in Star Wars or something like that. What's that? Yeah, or something like that. It looks like a landscape without it even have been inspired by any kind of landscape kind of thing. And I could then chase that. Well, how do I make it look? How do I push it a little bit more in that direction without totally going in and trying to draw a landscape? And this is a method that a lot of people who, I went to a school that does a lot of animation, and they have really great game design and entertainment design kind of people, and they had digital stuff that they had to, digital classes like learning to paint digitally, but also they had a huge emphasis on actually learning to paint with like wash and watercolor and stuff like that. And so this would be a really good jumping off point for, I want to make a sci-fi environment, and I don't have anything right away. Someone said something, I don't know who it was that quoted this, so can't attribute it to them, but they said inspiration is like a dinner guest. Sometimes they show up, sometimes they don't, but until then they paint. That's kind of the thing. You can wait around for inspiration forever and it might not ever come. So just kind of taking something, fine, I'm going to take this, I'm going to take a little bit of this, smash them together and jump off of that point. Can help jumpstart that without you having to wait around for anything. So come back at 7:38, take a 20-minute break. Walk around, just relax, look at stuff. You can go outside too. There's trees, there's those bushes that I saw coming in. Yeah. Okay, yeah. If you have, well, if your card should be activated to swipe in. You'll be able to get in the first door, and then that's where the swipe is in the second door. Or just make sure there's people around sitting in that area, or have a buddy with you. Yeah, be aware of that too. There's those grassy bushes in front that I noticed when I came in, that if you abstracted them, they could look like a fireball kind of coming down, or if you zoomed in even closer to them, what that texture would feel like in line. So try to think about that when you walk around. There's a lot of stuff to be inspired by that you can take and make something interesting out of. So yeah, come back at, well, 20 minutes from now, because I just talked a little bit more. Come back at 7:40. I'll give you an extra minute. Or you can stay here and sit down. You know, you don't have to leave. There's lots of stuff around here.
But this is a requirement for one of my classes. Are you? I was told it was.
Probably not. I don't know what that is at all. What class is it for?
It's a first year experience class.
Oh, okay. With Andy. Right?
Yes.
No, I can ask her what that is. I don't know what it is. I don't think we'll be participating in it, but it might be a bigger conference overall.
Well, what I meant was like, we're trying to like classes that day, because I was told it was
Like a
it's an art event for the art students.
Okay.
So, kind of,
I'll ask her about it. I'll get back to you. I don't know off the top of my head.
where the art students have to be the staff.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just suggested it didn't look at the photo. Yeah. Uh-huh. Okay. Right. Yeah, I really like this thing because it reminds me of just this shimmering lake, like you almost stop looking at everything, especially the light work.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah. That's what I like about it. Yeah. Cool. Okay, yeah.
It doesn't look good to me.
Yeah, I mean, that might be something that you might just have to, often something myself. Talk to myself and I give myself permission to fail is basically what I tell myself. It's okay to fail. This isn't going to be anything that will be framed. The material costs almost nothing. So I try to keep that pressure for myself as much as possible. And then oftentimes what I do is I would just take that boundary, make a scribble, and then react to that mistake that you made and see where that goes. Basically, just throwing yourself off the deep end, and hopefully that will help inspire you more. Yeah. Next class, yeah, we're gonna take one of these and blow it. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Think about classes that were hard.
Okay.
I'd be doing this exact same activity. They wanted to get us some more vibes.
Oh, yeah.
Shape.
Uh-huh.
And also it's kind of thing where it's just the paint on these.
Oh, would make it blob and then make that something.
Yeah.
Yeah. that's always fun.
Yeah.
The nice thing about that one, sort of, often bringing preconceived ideas to something, but when something is already a mistake, and then like paint, you know, it becomes easy to see something in that and transform it into something, and you're not as stuck into what do I make, you know, it's just whatever comes first. That's always cool. Like, you're like, oh, I'm bored, but I want to be creative, but I don't know what to paint. Like, that's a good idea. To draw clothing. Uh, Not really. Usually when I focus on a person, it's just a portrait. Usually. Why? Did you have a question? Clothing.
Like drawing stuff in.
Okay. Like the folds. Well, kind of what, I did here is a, oh, I forgot that's something. I'm charging my computer. On a smaller thing. Where. Not help push that whole and let the.
But how would you do that for more?
Um, this is the top of that. So, I'm thinking about this as an extreme version of that, like a valley.
Just have so many.
I don't like them that much. I like the charcoal. Graphic.
Based on how much chunks of it, particularly this chunk ever.
And garbage. Drawing nothing, but working on an illusion. But yeah, the tip of the mountain has a little bit, is lighter in the valley. General rule. Yeah, I think so. What I would say now is let's work 20 more minutes now that you have fresh eyes on thumbnails, and then after that, we'll do some critiques. Make sure you're thinking about what your most interesting one is to you or your best one, why you feel that way. You're still having a hard time. Sometimes it can be kind of hard to punch through that freedom, like giving yourself the freedom to mess up, to make mistakes, to draw, and just to kind of unleash your creativity. One thing you can do is just scribble. Make a scribble in one of your boxes, and then react to that. Or, just a couple marks without thinking of anything at all, and then react to those and try to build off of those more. Trying to focus on breaking through that, I think, will be really important to going forward past this class, just being able to, give yourself permission to be creative. That can sometimes be the hardest part, really. And if you're still having a hard time, I'll come over and I'll scribble on your paper. You can react to that. No, I think a bad reaction is still a reaction. So if you have something that you make and you're like, oh, I hate that, that's still useful to kind of catalog in your brain of, well, what is it that I hate about that? And it could even be its own challenge of, well, how do I take this thing that maybe I've distilled that I hate about this, piece of this drawing, and how do I turn that on its head? How could I, envision a world where I do like it, or can I envision a drawing where I take that and I do end up liking that? How do I flip that on its head? So even a bad, and I think about all art, not just this. If you see something and you're like, I hate that, what is the reason you hate that? And kind of digging into that will help you for sure be like, well, that's definitely art that I want to avoid once you get down to it. Or challenge yourself to be like, well, how could I make that good art, kind of? So I don't think that there's anything, I mean, the worst thing you can be doing, and it's fine if you're doing it because it will come naturally a little bit, is playing it safe and holding yourself a little bit back. Feel free to go as wild as possible as you want. Maybe you scribble out the whole thing and you're erasing parts away and you're scribbling back into finding what those shapes are. Or, maybe it's really just, you like the feeling of really digging your pencil into the paper and you're kind of interested in that in an area. There are these not old, but traditional figure drawings that I really love looking at, where people do these beautiful figure drawings, and then to sharpen their pencil or to keep it sharp in the corner, they'll like scribble. So there'll be this beautiful, like really well resolved figure drawing, and then there'll be this really dark scribble muck in the corner, which kind of looks really, really beautiful in juxtaposition to that, and would be itself really interesting if you could expand on what that is, because oftentimes those marks come from a place that is not tied to you thinking about making marks. You're thinking about sharpening your pencil first and foremost. You're not thinking about marks. So those marks come from almost your subconscious and are a little more honest feeling. I would say working towards accessing that, even if you feel like your personality is a little more organized, or what they might call type A personality, where you like to exert a little bit more control if you're not as comfortable with that. Find kind of chaos within that, or try to at least, and try to chase that. Okay, you'll have 5 more minutes and then I'm gonna talk about some of mine and then I'll take volunteers to come up and show their work. You can sit over here, you can stand. You're not put on trial. I know that probably feels, standing in front of someone. I just kind of want to have a discussion with things and obviously we probably won't get to everyone. So there probably might be some people who are like, well, good, I want to get away from having to do that. But I think it'll probably be more enriching for you, especially if you feel like you're lost in a direction that the room could comment on. I actually like the one that you hate, the most, because I think you actually have something in there where we can help describe those things for you, or try to, and give suggestions, especially if you feel like you're kind of lost. Or you could be helping someone if you have one that you're like, I really like this one. I definitely feel like this is the one I want to go into the project with. Showing that to people can help inspire other people. Or they can even say, well, I can see, that, but pushed in this direction, and you might not have even considered that. And now you're like, oh, that would be, a great idea. I want to kind of revise this a little bit. I think you do, going back to like feeling like you need something to help you break through. Especially if you're kind of defaulting to being controlling, I guess, is surrendering that control. So get a sheet of paper and tape it to a wall, get a long stick and tape your pencil to the stick and try to draw from there. Inevitably, it's not at all going to come out how you would probably predict or how you would kind of want it to. So you're already putting a barrier in place to giving up control to that. You would like tape the pin to your finger or tape it to your elbow and try to draw with that. And then working off of that, maybe that's not even how you do the finished drawing. If that makes a mark that you're super interested in, and you're like, oh, I'll just take that and isolate it and build off of that. Inviting a little bit of chaos can be the perfect solution to kind of getting over that control aspect. Well, I mean, a lot of cool drawings can come from having that control too. I think the curved drawings that I was doing in the beginning, that's more of a controlled, drawing to make sure that those lines are generally equal distance apart. Okay, 8 o'clock. So I'm gonna show mine again. And I'll talk you through kind of some more stuff that I was thinking. Okay, these are obviously the ones that I did in the beginning already. I liked this one, so I was honing in on that one a little bit more. I kind of did this one, and then I developed into these ones, and I really felt like it felt like fire when the wind is kind of blowing on it, and it's kind of moving directionally, like up a hill maybe, or trees were falling down in a mudslide or something like that. It's kind of what these reminded me of. So I thought that was interesting and I wanted to expand on it. And I kind of did some of these, but then I was playing with the side of my pencil and I did this drawing. And there's a lot going on into this one. And so I thought it was really interesting. It looks like a flower or the knot in a tree when a branch gets cut off or whatever, and it gets really old. And this one does too. And I like these areas. Like those are my kind of favorite areas where there's some depth in there. There's something going on, but it's not anything that is objective. If it's anything, it's something that you're bringing to the drawing already, and you're saying, "Oh, it looks like this," but it's not really anything. It's kind of, and I find that aspect really interesting too. But I find the depth of there's a variety of lines. There's movement kind of sweeping through. There's these kind of energetic, honest, I guess I would call them, lines that I really enjoy that aren't always easy to access. This one's kind of interesting too. It's a little more pared back, but it feels kind of like, I don't know, a bird's nest on some like reeds in a lake or something like that. This mark specifically looks like some kind of water plant coming out of the water. And that was just from scribbling, so I kind of went with that. There's some of the hatching marks that I put in. It also reminded me of, there's a Cy Twombly painting that kind of that has marks like these. You'll probably go over him in art history if you guys haven't already. He does a lot of mark making. I don't always like his paintings, like overall, I don't really like his paintings, but there's always pieces that I hone in and like, oh, that's an interesting mark in there. And then I had, this one's pretty interesting. I like this one more than I thought I would. And I think part of that is once you loosen up and you start building off of bones, your own momentum, you can take inspiration from anywhere. I was pretty well warmed up in these two. And so the mark making is really interesting to me. And then the subject matter is just kind of funny that it just came from really mundane stuff. This one kind of goes back to that fire. It feels like a fire or like really large clouds moving in. And so I did these shapes to be almost like embers flying up, I was kind of thinking, scribbled in, but also, I don't know, kind of like a weird landscape. If you think of that movie Elysium, it was with Matt Damon a while ago. It was Neil Blomkamp, the guy who did Chappie and District 9. Huh?
You know, the floating islands and Avatar?
Oh, yeah. Well, in Elysium, there's like this satellite that all the really wealthy people live on, and it's like a donut, and it rotates to create the gravity. And so there's a scene where they're landing their spaceship on, and there's a regular landscape, but it also bends up, and you see it move away, and that kind of is what reminded me of that, where the landscape is continuing in a way, but vertically, which is kind of interesting. And then I thought of this one guy, I'll show you his work in a second, because I really like it. He does landscapes that look kind of like this. After I thought about him, he kind of got in my head, and so I was like, I want to try one. And it's just like these scribbled in lines. These kind of shapes reminded me, and then these like thin lines, some of these thicker dark areas are very much what he likes to do. And it's kind of a landscape, but not really at the same time. You could show it to someone and someone might say that it's a landscape, but it's almost hard to like prove that. It's just shapes and it's just marks, which is kind of really interesting when you can push that line of existing in there. And you can do that really with anything where it kind of looks like this thing, but it's not really. It just has almost the essence, the spirit of it, without it actually being that thing. So I'll show you his work real quick, just so. The sense of it. His name is Harry Stushinov. I think he's British. I don't know. So like that. It feels like there's a lot in there, but like look at these scribble lines. And then he has these trailing marks, some of these circles that feel like small bushes or maybe rocks or something like that. And then he has this shape outlined that's like the tree, but he hasn't even colored it in all the way. And then this one, he either over-colored or whatever, but it's a really interesting, I think, compelling images of just marks in there. He had another one over here. Got one specifically that I was thinking. I mean, this one is a little more landscape-esque because there's the color in there, but he still has that drawing marks in here. These are something, you know, if you think of scale, if this is a tree and this looks like distance, you know, I don't even know what those would actually be, but it does hint at still being something in a landscape. They almost could be like pillars of something. It's probably some kind of continuing trees without making them quite as just same blobby shapes. But if you think about the scale of that, that would mean that this tree is huge, like humongous. If these are like normal tree height, or however tall regular trees are. This one would be huge because it's still pretty close to the foreground. But that kind of makes it more interesting that it's a landscape, but not really one that you would say. Oftentimes we see a beautiful sunrise, a painting of a sunrise, and we're like, oh, I've seen a beautiful sunrise like that. Like we have a relationship with that painting almost already because we've experienced a similar thing. This one is almost, I can kind of say I've experienced something by looking off onto that, but nothing that's exactly like this, you know. The colors in the sky are pretty weird too. And this like puke green that works really well with this like black or dark green. I really love that. This one's just like, just scraping it. It looks like night in a, when I lived in California, I would drive back and forth from Arkansas to California for Thanksgiving and for this to come back home for the summer. And it's like a 24-hour drive, but there were a lot of spaces in between that were just nothingness. We have some pretty rural areas around here, but in areas like Texas and New Mexico and Arizona where there's just nothing and everything is super, super flat. There were areas where my eyes felt like they were just like splitting apart because we have so many trees around here. There's your vision is kind of cut off. You can't see infinitely. But when I was driving through Arizona and New Mexico, it was the first time I'd ever seen the shadow of clouds on the ground just moving. You could see them because everything was so flat and clear. It was, I had never seen anything like that before. But this reminds me kind of that because you'd look off to the side and you'd see one house or a warehouse that, you know, someone uses just, you know, sitting out there in the middle of nothing with this, the sky kind of feels like it's electric, and it kind of feels like when you're in somewhere that you are unfamiliar with at night, and it's kind of, there's kind of an anxiety in the air for you because you don't know exactly where it is that you are, you're unfamiliar with this place. And that, you know, those jagged lines really add to that. For me, you know, this is obviously me putting everything, bringing myself to this image, but I think that's what's so compelling about these lines and these marks and what they can do for people. So yeah, I wouldn't, I mean, you could probably fly pretty close to what he's doing if that's what you're interested in. Because these are, you could say they're landscapes, but you could also turn them upside down and no one would identify it as a landscape versus like a sky painting with trees. You can't just turn it upside, it would just be an upside down landscape, you know what I'm saying? These are a little more playing in that kind of blind spot of, or that gray area. Yeah, cool. So yeah, so you can kind of see now even more how much I was thinking about his work in that one. It does look like a crafted version. So do we have any volunteers to come up and, yeah, cool. Yeah, I mean, I'll probably just ask you some questions. If you just want to show us what your favorite one was and why.
Yes, because I like the only reason why I like it is I like the interruption of waves. Whenever I would go on vacation with my family in like Florida or California, because we'd always get like a hotel in there to see. And just randomly throughout the night, you'll just hear the waves crashing against something. So it just abruptly happens. So
Right.
that's what came to mind whenever I saw the word.
Huh.
Yes.
As you move into these a little bit more, I would go a little more,
Abstract.
yeah, non-objective, where, and you could keep this same reference, but just instead of making boundaries, scribbling in shapes, and instead of, because your outlines are almost corralling those shapes to say this is what it represents. Whereas if you lose the outlines to scribble in those areas, you could pretty much keep that same image and lose what it would really feel like in terms of something objective. It's like, oh, okay, this is straight up, you know, it's like, yeah, an abstraction would be another way to say that. But, yeah, cool. What do you guys think? I don't think the Strictly one too, and I don't know if it's the resolution or here.
I don't remember how to draw flowers, so I was just.
It looks like, yeah, it looks like a flower, or like, it reminds me of prickly pear cactus, where they have, like, cabbage,
That's what I see.
where they have those fruits on top of them. There's red fruits on top of them. I don't know why. I think it's the kind of bubbliness, but then it gets kind of prickly underneath.
Because there's thorns on the stem.
Yeah, it does look like there's thorns creeping on it, but.
The little stabs. I have a second page, but it's pretty much like the same, other than, I want to say this one, which I was just kind of doodling.
Yeah, I think what this one could use is a little bit of variety in line width, like if you put in some nice and thick lines, or just went over a couple of your lines a little bit more, I think it would add a little bit more texture, and I mean texture not in this way, well, that's a separate project, but texture as in just variety, into it. I think that would, because this one, maybe I'm just on a kick about clouds. I don't know. It feels kind of like a storm a little bit. It feels like there's something sweeping in. I do like that.
I was thinking of a really weird looking waterfall.
Yeah, okay, well, I got some falling movement in it. Looks like it's going down. Yeah, yeah. And what you could even do too to this one is maybe even tilt it a little bit more, just so it's a little bit more of a diagonal. Like, yeah, maybe. I mean, maybe I'm wrong.
I like how like the lines are a little more.
Yeah, yeah.
This actually looks like the one, illusion one, but that could be because I have all that outside.
I think I see what you mean, like the hair would be going this way, and like this is just kind of a background.
Yeah,
Yeah. Like really big nose, if that's the part.
I think that would be the bunny.
The bunny ear?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the face on the bunny.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
What, and another thing now that I'm seeing some of your drawings too, is that you could take a bunch of objective drawings and layer them until they've abstracted themselves by just doing a drawing and then doing a drawing right on top of that drawing and then doing a drawing until you're like smashing it. There'll be eventually areas that are just whack from
Drawings.
yeah, from drawing. But, yeah, cool. Who's next? Yes.
All right, so I just kind of started with some of those words to get some inspiration. And I realized I was feeling something a little more sharp than the curvy stuff. I didn't really know where to go with that. I was just being a little too predictable. That looks like cloud. So I guess with that kind of mindset, it took me there a little bit, where I started following that idea of the S you showed us, but not really. It's more so like thin to bigger, and then the overlapping I really liked. See a couple more examples right here. Then I guess I wanted to give the curvy another chance and tried something like that. I don't really know where I was going there. It does look like
I was thinking almost like a field of wheat or something like that, where they have the rows.
I was thinking of salad. I think it's on YouTube.
I thought it stacked.
yeah. And then you could see I started kind of taking this direction, almost like trees with cacti with like grass, if you will. You could see that took me to almost like a fire thing, something similar to that. This one,
Yeah.
yeah, I like this one a little bit. It like kind of makes sense, but not really.
Yeah, I think that is really interesting about that one too. And I think it takes up more space in your compositions without just being extra stuff in there. Like everything feels like it builds on itself, where I can kind of follow facets that aren't really there, they're just lines. I enjoy that one a lot too.
Thank you. I'd be going in that direction for the project or something like
Yeah.
these.
Yeah,
Those are good too.
I think
Spiders.
that one is the strongest one.
That one?
Yeah.
You can get all the shade of that one, I think.
Thank you.
It reminds me of scary clowns from a horror movie.
I'm feeling like it's time.
Yeah. It reminds me of maybe Dr. Seuss pipes or something like that, mixed with like a tornado that's touching down kind of, or, it's pretty interesting. But I think the mountains are cool too. I think the facets of that feels rocky without being objectively. So, yeah.
I was saying the one that you said looks like a fire, I was thinking it looked like an underwater.
Interesting hearing all the different perspectives.
Yeah. Oh, and these will be 11 by 17. If you want to crop them down to square composition, I'll let you do that. I'm totally fine with that. But know that there is going to be a translation difference. Some drawings will get better when they get blown up a little bit bigger, and some drawings will feel a little emptier when they get blown up a little bit bigger. So knowing that, like if this feels too small when you do blow it up, the mountain one, you could just add more parts of the mountain.
I was wondering about
to
that.
it, yeah. So, yeah, cool.
Alright.
Yeah. Who's next? Yeah, cool.
Okay. So these are my initial adjectives I was playing with. There was a few of them I liked, like the lazy and weary one. I was kind of referring back to the different positions on like the canvas or whatever, and thought that lazy I could use the effect of like weight to convey lazy.
Okay.
So I kind of got like, this is like, something kind of sagging into, another object. The rapid one, I thought conveyed rapid very well. And I also think it's kind of funny because it looks like, and then the broken one, I thought was the, probably like the one that conveys its adjective the best, because it was like, oh, obviously like, it shows something that as it's supposed to be, and then something, to what, juxtapose or whatever.
Right.
So I thought, okay, let's build on that. We'll go with broken. So I started playing around with the one previously used as an example. This one I liked a lot because it's another example of, something kind of incomplete and, that's been kind of, physically broken. Then this one, or these two, I started playing with another object in the mix. And this one, I kind of went back to this idea, but kind of incorporated some falling, and then falling also, I kind of went on this one, went in on that one a little bit. Which one?
The bottom right.
Bottom right. On this page, I think that was my favorite. It was kind of like an expansion on this idea. I think this one and this one were my favorite on this page. This one was just like, I don't know what happened there. Shappy back, per se. And then these were after the break. These two right here obviously changed direction. Actually, pretty much all of these. I think for the project, the one that would be most fun to do, I feel like will be this one, the bottom left. Because I guess it kind of portrays the impact. And then this one was kind of just like an extension on that, but without, whatever this is. But I think I'm kind of torn between this one and the one you mentioned, my favorites.
I think this one, actually like the rapid one too.
The which one?
The rapid one, is that what that one was?
The rapid?
Rapid.
Oh, on the first page?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think if you look at the mark making here, how much more rapid and looser I think it is. And I think too, the way you're filling your space here with more lines, there's kind of more for us to look at.
Yeah.
When I talk about paintings and the painting class, I usually talk about how when you make something, what's really nice is that if you see it from across the room, you're like, oh, that looks interesting. And it makes you want to walk up on it. And what's, to push that even further, I think what makes it really fascinating is that it makes someone want to walk up on it. And then once they get up to it, there's more to investigate. And that's, I think, there's a little bit more I can focus on with this one than the other ones. But I think you can take the other ones towards, having more by adding more line weight. If you go to the last broken one, the one that you liked, or the one that.
Which one? This one or?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. If you had all of the squares, I'm trying not to say shaded it, like a shading class, but if they were all scribbled in with line to make them darker with hatching or whatever, that explosion would feel like it's almost like creeping into this dark space, like it's taking up more space.
It'd be really cool to shade each square differently. I think that, rather than them all being shaded horizontally or.
Right.
Just using the white space, the dark and everything.
Yeah, and it'll feel like that white space is kind of invading a little bit more.
Okay,
more
okay,
emphasis on the-
I gotcha.
And I think what's interesting too about this one is it's almost, exactly the rule of thirds. Where you.
Oh, yeah.
You've actually divided it with the cross and then.
And then,
One. And I think too, that's why, one of the reasons why this one works, I think there's that interest in that feeling like it's an explosion, but also it's right on an area that just worked really well.
okay,
So, yeah.
cool. Sweet.
It's like just in this room.
So I actually wrote notes to myself on some of these. Just so I had a better idea.
Do you want to start at the beginning? I think it's interesting.
Okay, yeah. And share my
Yeah.
thought path. So this one's very random, but it made me think of someone shivering. Like in like comics or any animation or anything, they have like the little squiggly lines next to or above their head or whatever. And then I was like, okay, I'm gonna draw circles. These two are very random. And then I thought of, waves, and I was like, oh, that's calm. But then I also realized as I was drawing it, it kind of reminds me of sound waves as well. Because, the lower, fidelity, I think it is, the lower the waves become, the calmer the sound kind of feels. Then these are random too. I didn't like those, so I even wrote who knows on that one because I didn't like them at all. And then I kind of took the waves and ran with them. This one there was just too much going on. It wasn't very calm anymore. And this one didn't have too much of that wave action. So I was like, I don't like that one. These aren't really much of waves either. I really like this one. This one came out really nice. It was angling my pen. You can't really see it as well up there, but it's kind of spotted. And like there's some line and there's some spots because I angled my ballpoint pen just enough to the point where it would look like it's there and not. And then I was like, well, what if I made it more aggressive? And I kind of liked that, but I was like, well, it kind of looks like a tornado. So then I took it and made it vertical. And then as you pointed out, when we had that break, you were like, oh, it kind of looks like glistening. Or like, and when you said that, I thought of Beam Me Up, Scotty. And the whole,
Oh, yeah.
the little
Yeah.
stardust looking thing. And then that would be top view, a tornado. I've never seen a tornado, but I hear they're obviously a little more common. I'm from New Hampshire, by the way. I've never seen one or heard one, but they're always fascinating to me.
What was it called? Yogi cards? You know what I'm talking about? Those cards, like, almost like Pokemon cards.
Oh,
Yu-Gi-Oh?
yeah. That like, yeah.
And then I took more of the vertical with this one, I really like, it reminds me of, rock pillars. No, I don't like any of the rest of them. It didn't come out quite how I wanted them to. And then let's talk about this one. We're not gonna talk about this one, but it looks kind of like Frogger, I guess. This one I really like because it kind of had that glistening effect, but it also kind of reminds me of pancakes stacked on each other, or dishes, or not very tornado. But, and then I took it and I was like, well, what about railroads? And that's kind of how I ended up with that one.
Yeah.
And it was very much a direct path from the beginning to the end of my work, but
I think the other glistening one,
The one that you
very
had-
first one, I think.
this one,
Yeah, I think that one, works the
that's,
best. I like the chaos one too, honestly, and I think
yeah,
one of the reasons I like the chaos one is because I know once you blow it up
that
larger,
would look really good.
it's gonna feel like you can kind of step into that. which would
Although
be-
I did make some accident circles down here, but I'd probably get rid, you can't really tell up there, but I'd get rid of them on the big version.
Right.
Because I like keeping it, it's chaotic, but it's synchronized because you're doing the same circle motion, so it's kind of like a calm chaotic.
Yeah.
What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say, I'm curious to see this one the other way.
That really looks like a tornado that way.
Yeah. Yeah, it turned out like.
That's kind of what I meant to do too, not small and then big. So I actually really like it like that. I think that would also look really good, blown up.
Yeah. Yeah, I think those three are really strong.
Yeah,
And I think, yeah, once it's upside down, it does,
it looks a lot better.
and I think it's partially because it feels like it's going like this.
It's kind of redirecting you.
It feels like,
Yeah,
yeah, it feels
as
like I
well
can
as,
go into it.
I wish I had made this top a little bit darker. I think it would have also pulled it together even more, because if you notice, this half is a bit darker than this half.
Right, I really like
So I
it.
think up here would also help if it were a little bit darker.
Just on the top.
On the
side.
top, yeah. The
Yeah.
rest of it, I think, is really well done.
Yeah,
I felt like a 5-year-old scribbling on paper, but it's okay. It felt good. I'll have to
Cool,
Take
yeah.
those and run.
who else? Yeah, cool.
Okay, so I don't like any of these, I'm not gonna lie to you, but I also forgot my sketchbook, so I had to walk back on it, but that's kind of it. So this one, I kind of thought of like the simplistics of what a person looks like the basic shapes. So that's about it. These are all just kind of like random scribbles that just kind of ended up happening. So then I also have these. So I walked back to my dorm on the like little break we had, and I was like looking at the like landscape, I guess. So this was like from the parking lot to the road that goes back to like the lot 10, I guess, but like from the top view.
Right.
This was like a scribble of the Wingate building. I took a picture of it on my way back. This, I drew like a person, but then erased it and just kind of scribbled all over it.
It's like one of my favorite ones.
Thank you. I just looked at my phone for this one, and that's kind of what came out of it. But I don't know. Like, that's all.
One to the left, the one that kind of looks like DNA,
This one?
not to the left of
Oh.
that. You're right.
I'm so confused. I'm not gonna lie. This one?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I don't like. That's kind of what I thought when I was
It reminds me
doing
of one of those toys at the doctor's office where they.
it. Yeah.
I saw a sign for
I kind of like the one above it. I think the one above it, because there's, some hard shapes and there's some, curves on top of it, some more organic squiggles. I think though, with some of them, if you add a little bit more variety, mark making, like the one of the person that you erased out. I think we have some of the lines outside of the shapes are a little bit thinner. And interior, you have those darker lines as they get, as the shapes point inward. And I like the composition of that one, where the shapes are pointing inward like that. But I do think the variety of shapes is interesting too. I think the person one I like the best.
And if you like look really close, I try to do like facial features, but I don't know if it's like coming off, but they're there.
It kind of reminds me of the old, I don't remember what the movement is called, but it's right before the abstract expressionist, there's like a resurgence of all the propaganda posters of like the working class people that the government helped fund. It reminds me of like when they have the strong men, because they're usually it's
Well, kind of like
industry.
that.
Kind of like what?
The one that has-
Oh, yeah.
Like that
Bruce
kind of
Lee, right?
artwork.
Yeah, but almost more cubist, because it almost looks like someone swinging a hammer to me, kind of, or like a really strong back of a really strong man with something industrial around him or something like that. I like that about that one. What's that? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that one brings out a lot of ideas. I think some of the other ones are, like the one where I got that on the tape was kind of like a phone, so it's not too much to wonder.
Yeah.
The one where I grew up is like there's a lot to think about.
Yeah, I think that one's my favorite.
To be honest.
Yeah, cool. Does anyone want to go in 3 minutes? I can do it. Yeah.
So, I titled these really quickly because, why not, you know? So this is DNA, a little scribble here, so like, I could go places with this, and that's kind of, this one's a mountain. This one's like a road. I thought of like, a road on a mountain.
Right.
Yeah. And then we have a fast road. These titles are amazing, I must say. And we have like the, you know, it's going, the little perspective. And then I did some scribbles here and it turned into a ship. I don't know how that happened. Yeah. And this is like the PlayStation symbols. We've got like a circle, the triangle, the X inside of them, and then we have the boxes. Anyway. This is like a sun, so I drew like some clouds at first, and then I wanted to put some like lines from the clouds, and then I made a sun. And then we have lace chips, but originally they were waves. And then I saw it again, I'm like, whoa, those look like wavy chips. This is like an octopus or something, it's kind of gooey, I don't know, a little bit unsettling. This one, waves with the rain. So we have the waves and then we have the rain. And we have sharper waves. This one's one of my favorites, I gotta say. I just like, I like the thickness of the lines a lot. Then we got ice where I did like everything kind of sharp, and we have like the foam and stuff. That's kind of fun. Then we have fire, you know, intensity, and then it gets like a lot thinner up there. And then we have curvy lines, and I wanted to see how I could like make lines into like round shapes. This one's called ball, and we have the lines into the ball. And we have a cave. There's like, you know, some depth there. So I don't know. We have a fireball, bricks. I took inspiration from that part over there. That looks like kind of like, that's really cool. So I was like, oh, I could do that. And then it kind of turns to bricks. So French fries. Not much to say about that one. Heavy rain. We have heavier rain. And then we have like a little pasture, like the one with the sun. And we have some rain. And then we have like a city in motion, another one of my favorites. Palm trees. And then we have like lines here for the sun. And we have arrows.
I think honestly, the French fries one and the Lay's one are my two favorites.
I think you're hungry.
Well, I think that French fries one kind of reminds me of,
Mhm.
cartoon, like, I don't know where this is coming from, but if there's a cartoon musical and you know, like the objects around start singing along,
Yeah.
it kind of looks like the, like skyscraper dancing, or like
Mhm.
kind of.
Anytime an audience is happy because of nurse, they just turn into little cubes. Because, you know, they're a little too lazy to animate everybody.
The Lay's one looks kind of like, to me, a bunch of, I don't know, like tongues or something.
Yeah, we like fun.
It's weird.
I see hair patterns.
Yeah, that looks like hair. Interesting.
Leaves.
Okay, that's time. I think the Lay's one and the, I think some of them I would just thicker lines, just like you did with the Lay's. I think that.
Yeah.